will the culture war fascists win? And, I think the biggest point of this, and I opened the piece with it in the opening sentence, they call themselves culture warriors. In reality, they're fascists. Culture wars, in quotes, oh my God, we've got to get rid of teaching American history, or at least the black history part of it. We can't talk about gay people. We can't let drag queens, perform. All this kind of stuff. While it seems, I think the average American thinks this is like uniquely American, and this is just the politics of the moment. This is literally how Hitler rose to power. Hitler rose to power, one of his first actions in 1933, one of the first things that he did was purge the schools of books that promoted homosexuality, and then went after books by Jewish authors. Hitler, proclaimed he was a Christian. This is, and therefore they had to clean out the schools and go after the liberals. This is nothing new. Viktor Orban rode this to power in Hungary, going after the Syrian refugees. Oh my God, there's brown people coming into our country and they're Muslims. We can't have that. He campaigned back in, I think it was 2008 or 2010, whenever when he first really came to power. He was in office for a while. He lost power. He got reelected. When he got reelected, he transformed the country into a neo-fascist state. And in that campaign, he had ran on building a wall along Hungary's southern border to keep out those Syrian refugees that were, crossing the Mediterranean on little tiny ships and coming in from Greece and Italy and whatnot. He was going to build a wall. He did. He actually built the wall. This is not culture war. This is fascism. Hungary is now a fascist state. There's no freedom of the press there, for example. In fact, kudos to Rachel Maddow for last night pointing all this out in her opening monologue. Democracies allow for healthy debate about cultural and political issues, from the level of government support to the needy, to limits on immigration, to the funding of public functions like schools, libraries, and utilities. Control of government in democracies regularly changes peacefully. It typically reflects the will of the people, as do the policies that they legislate into law. But in fascist countries, by contrast, both policy and leadership are rigidified. They're almost always under the iron fist of a dictatorial strongman leader and the morbidly rich. And legislation that passes represent the will of the special interests rather than the people more generally. And here in the United States, we basically have two parties who are dedicated to the two sides of this. We are at this bifurcation point, this fork in the road. The Democratic Party increasingly is embracing pluralistic democracy, egalitarian democracy, multiracial democracy. Democratic-controlled states like California are embracing even, ending gerrymandering, putting into place citizen commissions to draw congressional lines that are fair to everybody. Democrats believe in democracy. Republicans, on the other hand, are doing the exact opposite. They are gerrymandering like crazy. They are purging so many people off the voting rolls, millions and millions of people every year, every election year, that when Mike DeWine and John Husted were doing this in Ohio back in 2018, literally just in the big cities that are majority black, they were sued by the ACLU, I believe, and taken to the Supreme Court. And the five conservatives on the Supreme Court said, that's fine with us. No problem. You can purge people all day long. And they're doing it. They're doing it in red state after red state. Nikki Haley is giving a speech right now announcing her candidacy for president of the United States. And one of her biggest applause lines was that they were going to crack down on voting. The Republicans know that the only way they can gain and hold power is by rigging elections. They've been doing this since the 1960s with Operation Eagle Eye, that was help started by William Rehnquist. This big bear of a man, a 6'2" lawyer who used to stand outside polling places in black and Hispanic communities where he lived in Phoenix and loudly challenge everybody's right to vote. And a lot of people just got turned away and freaked out. This was before we had voter ID laws. But you could challenge somebody, and then they had to prove that they were a citizen. And if they looked like, hey, you might be Hispanic, you might be black, he would go after them. It was called Operation Eagle Eye. It was so successful, it was replicated all across the country by the Republican Party throughout the 60s and 70s until in the late 1970s or early 80s, I forget exactly when, but right in that time period, Democrats actually got a restraining order that lasted in place for over 2 decades against the Republican Party for doing this. Well, now they're back to doing it. This is fascism. This is how fascists rise to power. Fascism is the rule of the many by essentially an angry minority willing to use violence and political theater to rule, and merging the state with corporate power and billionaire power. And the Supreme Court set this up in 1976, 78, Buckley and Bellotti, and 2010 with Citizens United. And here we are. But they still continue to call these things culture wars. This is, and I in my article, I quote Milton Mayer at length. I'm not going to do that. You've heard me do it so many times, probably half of you have it memorized. Where he was talking to good Germans in after World War II, who said, it was a gradual process. It was the culture wars. We thought that, Hitler was cleaning up the society. He was going after the pornographers and pornography in the schools and stuff. And, we didn't realize where it was going to end up. Well, now we know. And yet the media continues to allow the Republican Party to call what they're doing culture wars, like it's some kind of benign thing, like it's the war on drugs or the war on poverty. These are not culture wars. These are the strategies of fascism. And we need to start calling it out. You can't fight something, you can't stop something if you can't identify it, if you don't know what it is you're fighting. This movement by the Republican Party to block the teaching of African American history, this movement by the Republican Party to make it harder and harder for people to vote and to purge people off the voting rolls. This is fascism, and we need to call it that.